Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. I've got all the way from New York, Johnny Quinn Alston. We've known each other for quite a while now, like a number of years, and where it's been sort of a work connection, we've also just gone really nerdy on our bodies and mental health and how we've kind of been working on ourselves as well as supporting family members and other people. I'm very excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Petra. I'm very, very excited to be here.
It's so good to have you. Now, of course, the context that we're still in, and this may be put out a few weeks from now, but is isolation, it's COVID-19. It's lots of people are in states of anxiety or perhaps that initial survival anxiety has kind of balanced out to a place of being more reflective or accepting and going, oh my God, what do I do with this time? How are you coping with COVID-19 actually?
Yeah, well, I would say that like many people, and obviously probably yourself as well, the initial weeks were just very disorienting in a way. I mean, I think no matter what a person was doing, whether they were running to work and working a full day or whether they were moving at a more natural pace, this reshaped sort of like expectations, I think, and also just like responsibility. So for me, the first few weeks were like, okay, this is crazy, like that we're
Yeah.
living in this horror movie. Everyone's running to Netflix. I go on, there's like 3 disaster films that are the trending top films. I'm like, okay, I don't know if these should be at the top, but we're living this as well. So there was definitely a surreal state of like, A, this is happening, and then B, what am I supposed to be doing right now? I have a lot of personal projects and work projects that I was in the midst of trying to get done. But also there was this feeling of like, okay, well, you have all this time now, you can start to work on things, but it was almost like a start and stop thing where it was hard to be productive or confusing about the reason to be productive because you didn't know, well, wait, where does this actually land? Before I had a couple of music projects that had an April date and a May date, and I had some other things that were all in that time frame, and then those were all not there. So I guess that question of having a deadline making you move sometimes
Having
was
purpose,
for me.
right? Like
Yeah,
really connected to the why you're doing it. Yeah.
having a purpose. And so for me, I think the first few weeks were like, all right, redefining not necessarily the purpose, but the priority of what I wanted to focus on. And I think I've just gotten around to like kind of writing out a whole month plan of things I want to do. But it took a while to say, okay, you can focus and you can work or have fun or learn things and relax on this time. But now you understand that you don't necessarily know when, or maybe this is not so much the goal in terms of a worldly sense, and it's more of a personal goal, and just trying to focus in and focus on those things despite the news
Yeah.
and getting off of the news as much,
Getting
because
off the
we're not
news
going to change anything.
yeah, is a really powerful one completely. And also I want to recognize that there's different people are being affected in different ways. So some people have lost their income, some people are on government stuff, some people are self-employed. So people are in a range of sort of adapting situations, not to mention those who have kids who are now home from school. That's me, 2 teenagers
Yeah,
in the house.
yeah,
I had to like coordinate because I'm going to be busy for the next 2 hours, like talking to you, and I've got a webinar after. And I'm like, map out your
right,
day. You guys are responsible. I've got to, you know. Um,
yeah.
so why is mental health important for you, first of all, and then we'll connect into some of the physiological elements. Why is it important?
Yeah, so in general, mental health is supremely important because it's sort of like our control center, right? It's our base of operations. If you think of your mind, and obviously you have your body, you have all sorts of. I think for me there are 4 themes of mental health. There's obviously the psychological side of it, which I think governs both mental and emotional health, but there's also your physical health. There's your social health, so your
Connection?
relationships and just your
Yeah.
general. I guess I would say the health of your ability to interact outside of yourself. And then we have our practical health, which is dealing with everything from the physical body to our finances to our career. And so for me, with You Are Right, Mate, we've done some discussions. That's sort of a philosophy that when we work with people, we base it on those pillars. And mental health is the core of all of those things, because it really governs how you're able to perform in those other areas. And so I think, not only is it important in terms of being able to perform and be productive, but it also is a way to, life is full of ups and downs and all of those areas. But the one area that can be your sort of sanctuary, not for everyone, and I'm not saying it's the same for everyone, but your inner sanctum, if I could say that,
Yeah.
is a place that you always retreat to, whether you want to or not. So being able to keep that maintained. It's not always going to be perfect. For everyone, it can't always be perfect.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is then the environment doesn't have to have as much of a destabling impact on you. So to talk about, like, now our environment is like huge, but in day-to-day life, there would be small things. You might lose a job, you might lose a contract, you might break up in a relationship, like those little environmental factors. And you're saying if we invest in that core piece, that inner part of ourselves, that stuff can come and go, but we've got that inner strength in a way to support ourselves.
Absolutely. And this is not new information, but I think sometimes that message gets lost, but it's been threaded through religion throughout time, whether you want to look at Buddhism or Christianity, this meditation even. And then when we get, if you separate from religion, you look at mindfulness, or you just look at grounding or stress and anxiety, it's always about being able to use this as a resource when all of that, which it always eventually does, goes awry.
Yeah.
And when we're talking, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, like, the one thing that we can be certain of is uncertainty, right? And as much as people are asking me loads of questions and like, how do we cope with this uncertainty? I'm a bit like, well, we've actually always had uncertainty. Like, that's just a part of life. It just happens to be this, bigger, but also collective. So we can all kind of reinforce this narrative around this big uncertainty, when actually, if you've been developing the skills to invest in yourself, as you're describing, yes, it might wobble you a bit as you adjust and adapt, but equally you're like, all right, I have this acceptance that life is like this.
And that concept, what you just said, is actually freeing in a way, because it's kind of like when you can accept uncertainty, and when you can accept that the only thing that doesn't change is change, then you can kind of say, okay, I need to stop trying to control everything, and I need to just wake up every day and know that anything can happen. And what are the things that I can do internally to create balance in whatever those situations are. So, I mean, obviously we're in the coronavirus context now, and so many, perhaps not everyone, there were a lot of people at the beach when the news was going on and all that. I envy whatever they have that makes them, not just, I guess, completely dive in. So, and maybe that works for them, but that's not necessarily the correct move. And maybe there's something else that they have to tap into. But I think, most of us are going through this period in a similar fashion. And I think we're at a time point now, it's mid-April, where there's been enough time to freak out. There's been enough time to be like, what do I do? What do I do? And maybe start to kind of prioritize what you want. But obviously there are still some people that are trying to figure out, especially with not knowing when it will end, what the right step forward is. And to go back to your question of why mental health is important to me, aside from the things I mentioned, obviously I do have a personal connection to this story. My younger brother, Wesley Jamel Alston, in 2011 was diagnosed with schizophrenia. It was similarly actually disorienting, a similar feeling when that happened, where we were like, okay, will this ever change?
What does this mean?
What does it mean? My parents weren't going to work in those first few days. He was out of school. I was really a mess. Like, it was a complete disorienting thing, but we're fine now. I mean, that was a decade ago. It was very stressful for us all in the beginning. He went through treatment. He studied mindfulness. He works now. He's in school now. You probably would not even think of that when you met him, because he has done that work to rebalance. And I think, I like bringing that example up in the conversations we have, because we often meet people who have what someone say are less puzzling diagnoses. I mean, they're still important and serious, but
Sure.
anxiety, depression may have a bit more of a straightforward path in terms of something like schizophrenia. But he has really conquered that. And at the time being, you see that he's able to do it. So I think that's just a reminder to me that we've been through something really disorienting, and yet when you try to understand the different pieces, you can come out in a better place than you were when you found out. So that's been part of why I got involved. Because of that, we met Johnny Benjamin, MBE, who is a very prolific mental health campaigner who also has a similar diagnosis to my brother. His life was saved by a stranger one day when he was attempting to, take his life.
Yeah.
And then they turned that around, and he's an amazing mental health speaker, and we've done some work with them after becoming friends with them first. That's how I met you. So all of those things are really important to me. And I'll also say that I had a startup in my 20s, and there was a good year there where something just got really off. I didn't know what it was. I'd be fine, and then I'd go out and drink like any normal person, but for a week after, I would just be completely disoriented. My thought, a lot of anxiety, just like productivity would hit a wall, and that was going on for a good year. It affected a lot of people. It brought a decent amount of just embarrassment because people were counting on me, and I was going through this, and I couldn't understand it. However, about a year into that, I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. I'm not understanding why this is happening. This wasn't happening before. And a lot of, looking into my past and looking into my health history. And I had realized that about a year or two before that was going on, I basically was prescribed a lot of antibiotics for, it was never clarified, but I think it was a mono Epstein-Barr related thing. Who knows? I never got that answer. But I do know that I got a lot of antibiotics, and from that point, I was unable to properly digest gluten and dairy. Had always been able to eat it, never had an issue until that particular time when I caught something and was trying to heal that. And so, over the years, I've looked back at that, and I was reading into it, and I picked up a really amazing book by Julia Ross, who's someone we've begun to collaborate with. I'm so lucky. That's
Cool. Yeah.
We went on. I learned about Johnny Benjamin, went to YouTube, pulled him out of the internet, got this book. It was amazing. Pulled her out of the internet. So I think that's my talent. But
Find
anyway,
people and collaborate.
Yeah. It's like, hey, you need to let's talk. But anyway, so the book was called The Mood Cure, and it basically looked at a lot of paths toward, I guess I would say, imbalance in mental health. And she's also written on diet and other physical things. But, the things that I read basically all pointed towards an opportunity to experiment supplementing with amino acids. So those range from tyrosine to 5-HTP to GABA. And there's others. And I didn't know what I was doing. I just went and tried it out. And I'll be full disclosure. The first thing I grabbed was the tyrosine, because I was like, reading the book, I was like, that sounds what I need, because I'm feeling a little sluggish. This is a pick me up. And it was amazing, but it was too much. I was just like, I was flying. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Crash if it's too much flying, isn't there?
Yeah. And I was like, this is amazing, but how do I slow down? But it taught me that these things really do work. And I think what I was surprised about and I think shocked about was that this was something I just read in a book, went to Whole Foods, grabbed off the shelf. I didn't have to go see a therapist. I was never put on antidepressants. And it worked in an instant. I did get sort of too up. So I went to Whole Foods again and bought the counterbalancing, which is GABA. And ever since, those issues that I would have, which I would say are stress and anxiety and a bit of depression that would come, and it was just alcohol. And eventually I think I was learning that it was excess sugar in my diet. Or if I accidentally ate gluten or dairy, those things were causing my physiology from my diet was, and my nutrition, right, were causing a physiological cascade in terms of my mental health. And
And
so,
I just want to highlight for the listener, and people will know this anyway, the separation of how these things are often treated. So often physical health, you go to the gym, you get a PT, maybe you get a physio, maybe maybe there's occupational health for how you're sitting. Like it's all very medicalized and physical. And then for mental health, there might be talking therapies and there's antidepressants, but it feels like it's different experts and separate. And this book that you're describing, as well as more recent research, I mean, it's not rocket science when we think that our brain and our head is connected to our body, right?
Yeah.
But we end up treating it as very separate. Like you have a mental health thing, go there. You have a physical health thing, go there. And what you've discovered is that the nutrition and what we put into our bodies affects our minds.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like you said, it's not rocket scientists. It's simply those that know, which is kind of a street way of putting it. But you know, those that know, and those that don't know have no idea. And there was a time when my thing was, okay, I need to set up some therapist appointments and but really I just needed to aid my body. And what I would come to learn was processing the things I was eating correctly.
And can I just say, as a psychotherapist, we're not actually given any insight and training other than what we want to research ourselves into the physical health piece impacting mental health. Of course, there's like a standard, 5 a day exercise, helps everyone be a little bit healthy. But I wish that psychotherapy and psychologists and all the rest of it were actually treating people from that baseline first before going antidepressant. Let's be in talking therapy for the next 5 years. And you're like, all right, do I just want to reinforce the problem, or and as a psychotherapist, that's not always the way it is, but it can be, right? Or do we actually educate and inform people that there are other ways of doing things?
Yeah, and I think that's like, I mean, so, and I'll give a little backstory about the work that we've been doing. So, I got to know Johnny and Neil. They've been doing great work speaking in the UK. They decided that we had such a good bond that we should also bring that into the US. And actually, before they asked me to help them with that, I initially was sort of like helping them facilitate speaking at various companies and universities in New York. But I had told them a few years before that. They like to say that this was all their idea, but I had told them that, because of my own journey and my frustration really with just how easy it was to sort of rebalance myself, but how long it took me to figure that out. I was kind of working on a like publication sort of online magazine thing that would be looking into alternative health therapies that people might not know about, and sharing that stuff sort of in a hip way so that, millennials were getting access to it, whatnot. I sort of occasionally was like, I don't know, you hear these doctors going missing after they reveal these secrets. I don't know if I need to be doing this.
Pharma's gonna find you.
Put that intention into the universe, but it's not just something one person needs to share at this point. It's all actually on the internet. It's all there. It's just my frustration and my shock was that this stuff was not common knowledge and was not being brought up, and still isn't being brought up in many mental health conversations, mental health therapy sessions, whatnot. So I do think I have a conviction to spread that more. And with You All Right, Nate, we have done some work with companies. We are bringing this into the fold. We've been speaking with Julia Ross's team about potentially building out an actual full program around that. And so I know that it's a missing piece for hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people, and it's something that people should look into.
What's been the reaction though? Because obviously you believe in it so much, so you talk about it with friends and work and all the rest of it. Like broadly, what do you think? Do people get it?
I would say it's been very mixed. We were at, I won't say the company's name, but we were at a very, very large company. And the first time I brought it up, someone said, oh, you can't just go around saying that's the answer. Like, that's not it. Like, they were just dead set that this was faux, medicine. They were just dead. And I'm well aware of the many people that think when people start to talk like this, that they're quacks or that it's pseudoscience or whatnot. Well aware of it. But the evidence for me is that I did it and it worked like flawlessly and almost near instantly. It's that type of thing. And this isn't the only thing. There's a lot of things beyond the amino acids. I mean, right now I don't even touch those as much because I've really cleaned up my diet and, trying my best to not, cave when somebody brings home like something really sweet and amazing and
That's
whatnot.
hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard. But I have really recently been doing a lot better in terms of what I put in my body, and that in and of itself not only has cleared up some of the mental fog and whatnot, but I've also had a lot more physical energy, which was a whole other thing that I think got impacted by my diet issues. So that's one route, is just simplifying and cleaning your diet. I've been in and out of sort of a Whole30 diet recently, and I couldn't believe how much better I felt. So there's a lot of things like that, and I think the reaction I got from this person at one workshop we were doing was, oh, that's not what the protocol is, and that's not how it works, and you can't just go around. I advise you to not go around telling people that. But my position is, I'm not saying that this is the answer, but it is certainly potentially an answer or part of an answer.
It's part of the answer. Yeah, and I always say that it can't be a one size fits all. There are certain components that are true just as far as health, right, in general. But I would encourage people to educate themselves, to test things. Like I've tested a range of well-being things on myself when I was in the worst sort of point, whether it was meditation or therapies or giving back, volunteering, just like a whole range of things. And now I kind of have that self-awareness of what supports me and what doesn't. And it sounds like you've been through a whole range of experimenting, learning, educating yourself, and all the rest of it. And you've mentioned a few things. I'm curious about your brother and if part of this has played a part in his, and I also want to point out from what you said earlier about your brother, the personal responsibility part in our mental health and our physical health. And that often we get on this like shock. You said it's disorienting. He gets diagnosed. Everyone goes, we trust the powers that be to advise us and tell us how to behave or what to do or what medication to take. And sometimes people just go, right, that's my lot in life. That's just the way it is. I am now labeled and this is going to be my journey. And other people start to really educate themselves and do the work to have the richest life possible. So I'm curious about the top things that worked for you, I guess, but also for your brother, if some of this supported him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to go back really briefly. You asked how people reacted. I sort of gave the
the negative one.
Yeah. But I also, at the same company in one scenario, another time we were working with them, had someone listen to what I said, and she said she was on her phone while I was talking about it. And when I finished, she said, yeah, okay, that's amazing. I just bought the book. So I think it's been varied, but I think it has to do with the person's openness, which I would encourage everyone to be open, versus just how entrenched they are in what may be a bit of a limited way of thinking. And just, but I think I can't imagine, I think if this type of information is promoted, people will be able to see that as a part of the menu to choose from and go from there. And so in terms of me, that has been I've probably been working with amino acids for about 7 years now. And that's been a major, I always have them with me. And I don't always need them. I don't take them every day. I don't even take them every week. It's just, if I eat something and I get a little, inflammatory reaction or, whatnot, I can pretty much predict my gut isn't what it was when I was 12. And so I need to help my body synthesize what it would normally get from the food if I'm not digesting it properly. So in terms of Wesley, it's strange. He was diagnosed, our birthdays are a day apart, 3 years apart, but his birthday is the day before mine. Okay. As you know, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I'm really into astrology. So I won't go too deep into that. I don't want to scare anybody away. But I will say that around the time that within a month, I came out to my parents, and then he was diagnosed. It was like these,
Whoa.
yeah, I don't know if I even ever told you that, but these
I don't remember
major,
that was that close. Yeah.
yeah, these major, it was July of 2011, I came out to my parents, and then that August, we took him to the hospital. And so these major, like, identity and life-changing things happened to us both around the same time. And that was also around the time, if I'm remembering correctly, that I started having these stomach issues. So it was really strange. And I was just getting into experimenting with not eating gluten and whatnot. And I was like convinced that Wesley had to cut out gluten. And I was like, I was like, Mom, he has to stop gluten. He has to stop. That's it. And she was running around like learning all these recipes, because we were trying everything. But ultimately, about 3 months into that, he was like, okay, this isn't going to work for me. Like, I can't just not eat this stuff. Yeah. So I don't know that. There's no scientific information in that. But that was me trying to help. And
also, everyone's physiology is different internally.
Yeah, and that's a big, important thing. Like, I'm saying what worked for me, but it's not all the same for everyone and everything. And sometimes you do need more here or less there. It's just, you really have to pay attention, but it is about looking at the full menu, I think, and knowing what all is possibly there. But what was, I think, really effective for Wesley, I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. In the beginning, I would say the first year was just really, really difficult. And there were really low points and whatnot, and just a lot of confusion, a lot of pain. And eventually, though, he was working with a therapist. They were trying, the different medicines, and not all of them were working immediately. And, he was just at a point where he was like, what is going to be the outcome of all this? But eventually he did find a regimen that worked. And I think in combination with that, for him, he started taking mindfulness classes. And to be honest, it's something I'm not really good at. I'll be fully honest about that, just because I'm always trying to do stuff. And I like to meditate, but I'm not sure if I can call that mindfulness. But he really got the hang of it. And I think it was a combination of that, plus also he was able to get a job that brought more of the, when we look at those four themes, I think the social theme of it, that's one of those things, right? Being able to get out and being able to get out of yourself, and change whatever you're dealing with sometimes is a missing piece.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing, just that social routine element, so that you can get out of your own head and kind of just obsessing about what's wrong and kind of have some purpose, I guess.
Exactly. And then also, he and I both are also very like into the gym. He's more so into like basketball. He's like, him and my dad are like, complete basketball fanatics. So he never stopped. That's one thing. Like, he never stopped playing basketball, actually, at any point of this, I think. Like, before it was happening, while it was happening, and still today, he's always loved playing basketball. And I think, well, we just know it's a very simple thing. It brings you into your body. You're not thinking as much. It's more of a physical behavior, and it's a mind-body connection thing. So I think that was all very important for him. And I was just really amazed with the transformation he had from where it was really rough to where he is now. Like, because we didn't know. I mean, when he was diagnosed, this will make us sound a little unenlightened, but most people who don't go through these things don't really understand what they are. And in the beginning, when they told us what it was, he was like, but he doesn't have, that. Like, we thought that was when a person is X, Y, Z, and da-da-da. And I mean, and it was tricky, but when we were told that, I think we had some fear that might be what we were always going to see, like sort of what he was going through in the beginning. So to see his change was like, oh, like, okay, like, we know that you still have the diagnosis. There are still, some things that he like may occasionally, I think he primarily like hears voices here and there, and he may occasionally hear them, but it's not like at the same intensity. And I think there was a time when he might not have been able to tell if they were something real occurring versus, whatnot. And now he just knows what it is, which I think a lot of that came from the mindfulness training, and it doesn't really consume him. So we didn't know that that was possible, I think. We just thought it would always be something where he was consumed by this. And now, not only not is he just doesn't, you don't even, it's almost like we don't even think about it anymore. I mean, we do if it comes up, and I'm sure he reflects on it and whatnot, but in terms of what he's presenting and in terms of, it keeping him from behaving and whatnot, it's really not a thing we talk about much at the current moment. So like we said, you never know, things go up and down, but that was really nice.
I do think that kind of relates to what's going on now, in a sense, where you were talking about a similar initial reaction of being destabilized, lots of fear, lots of probably reading everything you could. It sounds like your mom was trying to look into everything around how to support him, getting all the advice from everywhere. And at the moment, the news is on all the time. People are going fear, fear, fear. Even if it stops, the economy is going to be fucked for years and years and years. And like that kind of busy mind thinking that when you're in something, it will never finish. And people forget that good times people remember that good times go away. You're in good times, you're like, how long is this going to last? But when bad times happen, they're like, this is going to last forever, rather than kind of going, life is a bit like that. And sometimes we have the dips and sometimes we have the ups, right? And
absolutely,
life can change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it will always change. And I think, one of the things that I had to stop and sort of laugh about the coronavirus things is okay, while I understand that we don't know where everything's going, I've seen so many things, people are saying the world will never be the same. And, this just ultimate, chasm of darkness. And it's really, I don't mean to downplay the seriousness of it. My family was actually allegedly exposed to someone that had it through my dad's doctor. And so we were all on edge about that and whatnot. And then the 14 days passed and nobody developed any symptoms. So we don't know if we ever got it or not. But it's very serious. I know people. I don't know anyone that's lost their life, but I know people who do know firsthand people that have lost their life. And my grandma. I'm actually in North Carolina, by the way. I didn't tell you that.
Sorry.
I was out of New York when this started, and then I was literally heading back to the city, and I saw the stuff. I was preparing to go back. And I was like, maybe I'm just gonna not go back.
Smart. Yeah. I usually talk to you from there. That's why.
I love the spirit of all of the think pieces I've been reading where people are like, I'm a New Yorker and I was here during 9/11 and I'll be here, for whatever. I'm not leaving. I love it. And if I was there, maybe I'd have that, but risk practically just not there.
If there's a way to go somewhere else, then why not, right?
They don't kick me out if I did the wrong thing. I don't know. But I've been here, and part of that has been, because of it just made more sense to not go back up. But also, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia a year ago, and so we've also been on edge about that because maybe he's at a higher risk. And so, we've been seeing that process and dealing with it. But I think this thought I was having about these think pieces and whatnot, everything's different. It's not going to be the same. Okay, the economy, hit the bottom and all of these major changes we're having to make. And yes, it's very serious and very sad. And I feel for, people that are losing people. There is a general sense of mourning and awareness of the heaviness of so much death. That cannot be overlooked. But I just feel throughout history, things have happened and people have probably always felt that the world was just never going to be the same. But what is that? I mean, we adapt,
We do. I mean, I grew up with the world literally supposedly ending every 3 years of my life. So if there was ever something that I trained for, it's I've been, I don't know if I guess I've developed quite a bit of resilience. but I've sat back mostly and kind of observed people's reactions rather than being inducted into them. Other than my own business, because I work for myself, I'm in training and development, so loads of cancellations and having to sit with the kind of anxiety around, what's going to happen next. I want to leave people with some like, I don't know, top tips. So first of all, how do you deal with fear? Because you're talking about like fear, and that's often a precursor to anxiety, which leads to like eating lots of chocolate, which I did in the first week, and then watching the news and the cycle. Like, and I'm not saying from any kind of place of perfection, because we all feel fear, but like, how are you managing that side of things?
Yeah. Do you mean in this particular context? Or
Well,
just
I'm also thinking your entrepreneurial journey, like you're always the guy who's like hustling for new stuff. So you would be the kind of experience that roller coaster of, oh my God, new opportunity. Oh my God, I'm going to lose everything. Great opportunity, that thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when it comes to like career stuff, it's one of those things where it's almost like, if you're ignorant, you're able to do more. Cause
I agree with that.
I don't look before I leap. And yeah, I've gotten into many messes, but I've also done some really cool things. I just think, oh, I want to try this, and I just jump in. And that's just one area of my life. I'm not saying I'm like that everywhere. It's just with that stuff, I just love the thrill. So I don't really think too much before trying things, which is not fully good or bad. But I have felt the pain of things not working out, or some of those things not going the right way. And I think for me, it's just like, well, what I've learned is like, our emotions often are like reactions, or they're not. It's not like you can't touch what your emotions are upset about. I think. I mean, sometimes you can, and sometimes it's there, but no matter what, it's not. Your emotions cannot necessarily change things. So there is, I think, a limit. Like, I think your emotions are there to tell you things and to show you things, show you what you want, show you what you don't want. But the emotion isn't necessarily going to change the situation. So the quicker you can get out of an undesired emotion, I think the better you can just start acting again. And actions are what change things. And so that little journey of feeling bad, feeling anxiety, I mean, I have that, more than one time a year, because sometimes because of something that happened, but also literally because of my physiology getting out of whack. And I think what I would say is, while there are external things and you have to go through the work to learn how to find your center and balance that, something like my physiology, just to bring it back to what we were saying earlier, is a very real, very complicated thing that is not something you can just wishful think away. It's like, that's more of a scientific equation to solve. Yeah. And so my nickname for that is or like my metaphor is that your body kind of has its own artificial intelligence. One of my favorite books, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, he uses a motorcycle that needs fixing as the metaphor for like the human body. And it's got all these parts and all these things. And if that's not working right, then that's not going to work right and whatnot. And so I think the task is to start to understand the motorcycle, or start to understand your body's AI.
And how it all fits together. Yeah.
Yeah. And so from there you can know, okay, I'm still mad about what this person said to me 2 weeks ago. And I've been ruminating on that before I go to sleep and when I wake up every morning. Why is that happening? Now, a person that hasn't learned their AI, learned their patterns, learned whether it's food that's causing that or it's a psychiatric whatnot, would be at such a disadvantage of getting out of that loop because they don't have the map of their body's patterns.
So really, it's self-awareness is the first step. Is like, absolutely. How do I know myself, my triggers, my this, my that, my body, my mind, so that when life happens, which is uncertain, we kind of know, all right, well, this has worked in the past for me. Maybe I've got to add a little bit, another layer of information to my knowledge, right? But essentially, it's having a reflective practice or way of constantly learning about yourself.
Yeah, and putting it back in the context of those four themes: practical, the practical side of that, which is physical health, your finances, your career; the social side, which may be relationships and friends; the emotional side and the psychological side, and then the other I like to call esteem. I'm not sure if I said it that way earlier, but it's also just like your self identity, your ambitions, your confidence. Any of those areas can be both a pathway or a trigger into a personal crisis or out of a personal crisis. So starting to take note of if what those are from those four areas and say, did any of those lead me into this? Or how are any of those a way out of this? I think is a way to start to understand your map, your self-awareness, your AI, and then treat it and tweak it as need be. I think that's how I deal with it anyway.
I love it. And I know before we went on air, you were talking about like almost doing something to help you switch your emotional state quicker. So perhaps you're stuck in something and, you could either stay there for a week, a month, or you could be like, all right, I've got 2 hours or 24 hours. I don't know. Do you say something to yourself to like help that switch, or what do you do?
Well, I have a nickname for this, which is Switch Quick.
I know. It does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, it's so necessary for me because sometimes I've had these moments when I need to be doing something else. So for me, sometimes it means 24 hours. Sometimes I don't always hit the mark because I might literally just be like, if I have a gluten reaction, that's about a week and a half of just like not even all mental, just physical. And that can be more difficult, but I can still change my mindset even if I can't get rid of all the inflammation that goes on. But if it's a person to person thing, which is I think why I told you that if someone has caused something in a relationship, or if it's a boss or whatever, it's so easy to just hang on to that
and feel crap. Yeah.
And my dad always says, like, the only person you're hurting is yourself when you're upset. Whoever did the thing to you is not feeling what you're feeling, so you're not really getting anything out of that. So go ahead.
I just said he's wise. Your dad's wise.
Yeah. So with that, I think my way of that is literally, it's almost like I have thrown myself into the situations that I know that will happen to build up my immunity to it. So if there's a person, in my social life or whatnot, and they are a woodpecker, I
we all know a few of those.
I will I'll purposely spend more time there. So to say, all right, let's see how much of this I can actually
Whoa.
I know it's not always smart, and it's not always, I don't do it with everyone, but if it is someone, I'll say, let's just see
an opportunity.
how little of a reaction I can have to this. And so that's one way of building it up. And I think the other side is there's some people or things that we just think of over and over. It's kind of random. It's like, why is this person the person that and with that, I think it's just, sometimes if they're deeper wounds or whatnot, they hang on, and it's hard to completely get rid of them, but you can practice it by saying, all right, no matter what I'm thinking, what can I simultaneously be doing? Eating, but with carefulness, or going out on a walk or whatever. And what can I do to kind of counterbalance that and start to I think like you said, the awareness that you're trying to fix that, as opposed to letting it just rain on you. It's like, okay, well, I can grab an umbrella and I can be aware that it's raining. So being aware of it, being aware that you're telling yourself that does not have to be a big thing, even if it's happening. Because going back to my brother, he does hear voices, right? He hears them every day, but he no longer reacts to them. So it's finding that way of seeing these as things that are separate from you, that you don't have to hold on to. You can let that thought happen, actually. You can let that person
observe it in a way that you would mindfully, but it doesn't have to control your reactions. Johnny, we're always gonna have to get you on the podcast again because we just haven't had enough time to get, and there's so many other topics, right, that we could go deep on. So we'll get you on again. Before I ask my final question, if people want to connect with you, if they want to get you involved in their business or whatever it might be, I know you do so many things, but where can they find you?
So I would say that, do most people give out their personal email? If not, I'm going to give you our email. Our email is, info@youallrightmate.org. That's spelled YOUALRIGHTMATE.org.
That's
and that's our website there on the end of that. So
you're right, mate. Yeah. So we'll add that into the show notes so people can reach out for sure. And my final question is, what advice would you give to the person, I don't know, maybe they're in their early 20s, maybe they're in their late teens, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter what stage of life, but they are recognizing that their mood and their state of mind is affecting them in some way. They're not finding the enjoyment in their work. And you're talking about that physiological aspect. So what is maybe the first step or two or three that they could, like, how do they get started if this is new and now they're like, oh my God, there's so much information, where do I start?
So I would say, literally, we're always Googling, educate yourself, learn a bit. The first thing I would type into Google is physiology and mood, physiology and mental health. You're going to find a lot of interesting stuff there. People have written personal essays. Someone with bipolar disorder has written an essay about how amino acids help them. I would say start there because the problem might be smaller than you think. That doesn't mean discounting going seeing a therapist. You may need that, and you should always keep that as an option. But learn a little bit. Doctors get mad when you Google, but learn a little bit about what you can read to understand your body first. The book we like to work with, The Mood Cure, will have bits in there about relationships or other things. So you can start to see how these things connect. But at the very least, that's going to give you a vocabulary and a basis for when you do go talk to a doctor or whatnot, that helps you be more of a, this term floats around patient self-advocacy. It helps you be more of a self-advocate when you're able to just use the vocabulary versus going in blind and being told what to do. So I would say get familiar with the terminology, the triggers, the pathways, and understand it for yourself. Because if you don't know those things, you're just going to be told what to do. And sometimes what people are telling you to do is too much or not even right at all. So
absolutely. Or you're going to avoid the whole thing and just accept that you have a mood disorder or you're not happy in your life and keep watching Netflix and eating tubs of ice cream. You know what I mean?
And you could not even have that mood disorder, or you could not even have that diagnosis, and you've eaten, 3,000 things of ice cream over the past 6 years. I don't know. I don't know.
Past 3 weeks for some people with all this isolation.
And you might have not even needed to go down that path. So just make sure you know what all the paths are before committing to one, I would say.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. So be aware, be conscious, educate yourself. There are so many ways to invest in yourself and to join up our physiology and our mental health. Johnny, thank you so much for your time. Let's get you on again soon. Hope you look after yourself.